And especially right now, joy is what's going to propel us forward, and joy is what's going to move us into that next chapter of our lives. So many of us are recreating what is our new normal. So many of us are either homeschooling, or we're working from home, or we're doing, different things, trying to figure out what's next. I create a pathway so that we can get from where they are now to understanding who they want to be, and then getting to a place of recreating their lives and building in that joy that comes from the inside, that will then propel them forward and create the life that they now can lead with authenticity.
Oh, I love talking to life coaches. It just is music to my ears. And I know everyone listening is like, yay. Let's do that. This is Your Kick-Ass Life podcast, episode number 360 with guest Liza Harper.
This is the Your Kick-Ass Life podcast with Andrea Owen, a no BS guide to self-help and badassery. Because ladies, let's face it, life's too short for it to not kick ass. And here's your host, the girl who serves it up straight with a side of crazy, Andrea Owen.
Hey there, ass kickers. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you are here. And I hope that this episode finds you healthy and happy and pandemic good. I know that's what a lot of us have been saying when we're answering the question, how are you? Because we have a new standard, right? Pandemic good, pandemic fine, pandemic great. It's a little bit different than how we were doing maybe this time last year, right? But nonetheless, I hope that you are well. And I have a really great conversation to give to you this week. And before I do that, I wanted to congratulate the people that participated and won the drawing in the survey that we did around the podcast. And thank you so much for those of you who participated and the winners who won an amazing, exclusive, can't find in stores, Your Kick-Ass Life tote bag, along with personalized signed copies of both of my books. Those winners are Becca Kemp, Tasneem Mohammed, and Allison Arns. And again, thank you for those of you that participated. I decided to keep the survey open a little bit longer. I am opening it until November 11th. So if you still wanted to answer the few questions that we have up there, please head on over to yourkickasslife.com/survey. It is incredibly helpful to us to get this information from you. And I was looking over the survey and I added a question at the very end. It's not a mandatory question for you to answer if you don't want to, but I asked just kind of like, what else do you want me to know? With a text box for you to tell us whatever you want to tell us. And if you already filled out the survey and you're like, hey, I have so much I want to tell you, please shoot an email over to support@yourkickasslife.com with a subject line podcast feedback. And that question or that email really is anything that you want to tell us about the show. More specifically, if you heard a guest on another show that you think would be great for over here, let us know. Or if there are specific topics that we haven't covered, or maybe I haven't covered it in a really long time, I am happy and open to hear your suggestions. So again, yourkickasslife.com/survey. Although the drawing is already done, I am so grateful for those of you that can take the time to give us some feedback. All right, we have Liza Harper on today. And for those of you that don't know Liza, let me tell you a little bit about her. Liza Harper is a New York City born and Phoenix living life and divorce coach, mom of 3, who wants to empower every woman to find clarity through divorce and redesign their lives from the inside out. She wants to empower women to unleash their inner desires and live life by their own design. Live by Design, LLC was born out of her passion for wanting to create a place to help women forward to live their life without resistance. It is a place to encourage women to be independent, strong, and courageous to be the boss of their own lives. Her mission is to help every woman unleash their desires and divorce differently, amicably, and to provide knowledge and support for women to find clarity through their relationships and transitions, especially surrounding divorce. So without further ado, here is Liza. Liza, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am glad that you said yes and decided to come on because, I was reading about what it is that you do and your history and your story. And I'm like, this lady is so in alignment with what we talk about over here. And I've been a little bit obsessed as of lately with talking about and having experts on the particular topic, and also women who have been through difficult relationships and how they have healed from that. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But first I want to ask you about what it is that you do. And I love on your website and you say that you help women who have been through traumatic experiences redesign their lives and find joy again. So let's start with that. Like what are some of those traumatic experiences that your clients come to you with?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you so much again for having me on the podcast. I'm super excited to share my experiences and what I do. So what I do is I call myself a life designer, a life redesigner, I should say, because what I do is I help women who have been through divorce, grief, loss, relationship changes, essentially find their new chapter and find their joy. So as I've noticed, and I'm sure you have as well, with everything that's going on in the world, so many of us have had such a hard time really getting to the place of joy, getting back to what makes us happy. We've all been quarantined. We've all had so much going on. And especially right now, joy is what's going to propel us forward. And joy is what's going to move us into that next chapter of our lives. So many of us are recreating what is our new normal. So many of us are either homeschooling or we're working from home or we're doing, different things trying to figure out what's next. And what I did and what I do for my clients is I create a pathway so that we can get from where they are now to understanding who they want to be and then getting to a place of recreating their lives and building in that joy that comes from the inside that will then propel them forward and create the life that they now can lead with authenticity.
Oh, I love talking to life coaches. It just is music to my ears. And I know everyone listening is like, yay, let's do that. Well, and I'm curious, what's kind of been the norm about when women come to work with you? Are they in that place of, I forgot who I was along the way, or they don't know what joy actually looks like in their life? Like, what are kind of some of the nuances?
It's interesting because I get a little bit of both. I feel like from my own experiences, and we can get into that later a little bit, I remember a time where I didn't even know what joy looked like. And so some of the clients that come my way are either going through divorce or preparing for a divorce, and they're realizing when everything falls away that they're not even sure who they are anymore. They have no idea what even makes them happy. They've been so accustomed and so programmed to the day in and day out, picking up the kids or going, to work and then coming home to a husband that, or wife that is, they're not really connecting. So it's like almost like a zombie going through the motions. And then when everything falls away, they're like, oh my God, like, who am I? Like, what do I like to do? And do I like yoga? Do I like to go out to restaurants and eat? What is it like to even take myself out on a date? That's one of the exercises that I do, because I feel like it's so important to be able to know who you are. And then I do get, some clients as well that are in the place of also not even knowing what joy even looks like. It's been so long that they're not even sure how to get there. And that's where, again, we help with getting them back to that place of just losing time. That's where I go, for those clients who are unsure of what even joy feels like. We go way back to what was it like when you used to lose time doing something? What was that one thing? Sometimes it's even like playing in the dirt. I had one client that was like, well, I remember when I was young, I just, used to go outside in my yard and just, play with the garden, my mom's garden. I'm like, okay, well,
make mud pies.
Yeah. Like, let's start there. And it's amazing how it can unfold to what brings us joy today. It's like following that feeling.
Yeah, I remember writing about that in my first book, in 52 Ways to Live a Kick-Ass Life. I wrote a short chapter about having fun. And I have found that when we get to that place, which I think so many adults do, where we don't have fun anymore, or we realize like, when was the last time I had fun? Like when I sought out to have fun and create pleasure in my life, that I ask people like, think about what you did as a kid. I'm not necessarily saying that you are going to find the same amount of joy putting on a bathing suit, or not even putting on a bathing suit, like running through sprinklers or doing the hula hoop. Like you might, but I think like that's where it's important to experiment, because you never know. And it's just getting yourself to take that kind of action where you're taking a risk, when you're doing something silly instead of thinking that you can't, or it's frivolous, or it's dumb, or it's just for kids. It's like you have to get out of that, not just your comfort zone, but out of that stuck mindset of fun needs to look a certain way for adults.
Oh my God. Yes. I am
It's not necessarily bunko for everybody. You know?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
I've never played bunko, so I'm not judging.
But that's the whole thing, is that we need that. And we forget, we think that just because we became adults and have responsibilities, that means that fun is no longer acceptable. But it is. It freaking for sure is. Like, we need to do that way more every single day. I am all about infusing pleasure and joy every day. A little something every day just for you is literally like a daily vitamin. People should do it every day.
Yeah, I had to come to terms with that recently. I hired a new therapist this year, and that was one of the questions in our intake session. And she asked it so casually, and I am never stumped for an answer. Like, I'll come up with something, even if it's a joke. Like, I'm like, I don't know what the answer is, but I will make something funny. And she asked me, "What do you do for fun?" And I was totally stumped. I mean, granted, it was COVID, so nobody was really doing anything. But even before that, I was like, nothing, really nothing. So it was a little bit disheartening and really in your face for me to really think about that and how am I making this a priority? And so I say that for people listening who might not be like, yes, it's still 2020 and kind of sucks.
And we're waiting for it to be. No, I'm kidding. We're not waiting for it to be.
There are still things like some people love doing jigsaw puzzles, or I've got the list really is endless of things. We just have to kind of think outside the box.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And it's why it's so important. Even the small things, like this weekend, I infused joy in my life by creating this amazing caprese salad, because I wanted to recreate the energy that I had in Positano last year. I went to Italy for the first time last year, and that was my joy. So it could be as simple as just taking the time to prepare a meal for yourself that doesn't require microwaving. It could be that simple.
Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers inline and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/noise, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/noise to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/noise. Fast forward to the end of 2024 and think about your goals. What can you do right now to give yourself the best chance of succeeding? If you want to learn a new language, you absolutely should get Babbel. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Now it's so easy to speak simple conversation phrases with the guy that takes care of my lawn without having to consult language apps. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/noise. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/noise, spelled BABBEL.com/noise. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Well, I also read a post on your website about being stuck, and you, in the post, you were recalling a story about going through 2 divorces, and the thing that stuck out to me the most is that you mentioned that it's always worked out for you when you bet on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us what that means? What does it mean to bet on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a crazy story, and I'm going to do my best to shorten it here. So essentially, I am from New York City, and I was born and bred to hustle, essentially, make sure that I was doing everything I can to live my best life. I grew up pretty poor and wanted to have the most amazing life. That was my drive. It was like, there's no way I'm going to continue to be broke. Like, there's got to be a way for me to live rich like everybody else. Why can't I be like everybody else? So ever since I was in school, I continued to work hard. I continued to get straight A's. So I am a recovering perfectionist for sure. And I just wanted to race and get everything done. Well, then life, threw me a curveball and was like, oh, you've got a baby at 19. So now you're pregnant. And this was not part of my plan. And I was like, universe, God, what are you doing right here? And I had to pivot. And so, that was like betting on myself, number one. Like right there, I knew I was not going to let, my choice and having a baby change the trajectory of the life that I wanted to live. So she actually gave me even more force to continue to move forward. So I moved out of my parents' house at 19 years old, had various apartments throughout New York City and places like Queens and Brooklyn and different places. And for those of you who may or may not be familiar, and then got married pretty young and had my second baby. And realized while I was in that marriage, I was pretty, what's the word I want to use? Essentially, like I was calling in people that I thought I could save. So I was totally a rescuer and wanting to essentially save everybody. So my first husband definitely was someone that I thought like I could fix, quote unquote. And, I allowed that relationship to go on quite a long time, much longer than my gut wanted me to let that go. But I didn't listen to the signs. I kept moving forward thinking I knew better. And we decided that we would pick up our family and move to Arizona. And we wanted to move to Arizona so that we could have a better life, so that we could build a business and essentially no longer have to work for someone else. At that time, I had this amazing job that I thought I would be there forever in the fashion industry. And I gave that all up to bet on myself and my husband one more time and completely move across the country knowing no one and just, doing it on our own with 2 small kids. And, then we got here and my first husband, got his eye on a 22-year-old girl and, decided that was who he wanted to be with. And so here I was, in my late 20s with 2 kids in a foreign place, essentially no family, nobody here. And I had to reinvent myself. So it was one of the most traumatic times of my life. And we had built a business that was the way that I fed my family. And he was a narcissist and is one still. And he came after me with everything you could think of. And it was the most difficult time. But what I realized in those moments was that setting my boundaries, having clear communication, and having the support of my family, even from far away, was what got me through that. And knowing that I could do anything that I put my mind to. So going back to those roots from New York City, being raised in the grind, and knowing that I can put my mind to anything and make it happen is what got me through those moments of having to, lose the company that I had helped build, lose all the money that you could even imagine, and still somehow support my family. But I did it. And what I did was I pivoted. I pivoted every moment. I got another job. I got a couple of jobs. I hired a babysitter. I did whatever it took, to make sure that my family was fed, they were well taken care of, and I did what I had to do. And the major thing there is I never gave up. I never, ever gave up, because I knew that no matter what, I was meant to be here for a reason. And this was just part of the journey. And it taught me so much about my inner voice, about listening to my intuition, and about knowing that no matter where you are in your life, it will get better. If you choose it, you can make a different choice. You can choose to do something that may be outside of your norm, but that will allow you to move forward. And this was completely out of my norm. I could have, now, if I would have chosen to go back to New York City, that would have been fine too, but that didn't feel right. It didn't feel right to go and move everyone back over there. So, and then, as you mentioned, I've been married twice. And so my second husband and I, married pretty quickly after my first divorce. I was kind of a mess emotionally. I was on point when it came to survival, right? I was in survival mode. I was doing whatever it took for my family. But as far as myself personally and emotionally, I was a mess because my husband had just cheated on me. I didn't want to see it. This was before my life coaching career. And I chose to shy away from it. So I got involved with someone who was super similar to my first husband, except in better clothes, as I call it. And, realized that, very quickly, I realized I had done it again, but I was too shameful to admit it. And I went through with our marriage, and he was not a bad guy. He just wasn't necessarily, we weren't just not the right fit to be partners. And we were more so a good fit for each other at that moment when we were like both healing from different parts of our lives. And it's like we kind of came together to help support each other heal. And really that's where it would have been better to end it, but I didn't see that. And I kept thinking, oh, this will be the great husband that I wanted. And it just didn't turn out to be that way. But, with that, it's where, again, deciding that I needed to bet on myself and I needed to continue to pivot. And so even as that relationship was falling apart and we had a baby in the middle of that as well, I realized that I, again, had a choice. And so I could continue to go down this cycle of attracting men that I thought I needed to save and or, wanted to like rebuild or fix, or I could look inward and go into myself. So that's what I did. So the second time around, this was me betting on me even more personally, was that I decided at that moment that I was going to not date, that I was going to work on myself. And this is where I started my life coaching experience. And then also, my own experience in turning inward and finding out who I really was. And it's how I found my joy. And that is where I created the program, and my work to help other women find their joy to get through divorce and traumatic experiences.
I have so many questions. Well, I thank you for sharing all of that. And I'm sure that people saw bits and pieces of themselves in your story. And you and I have parallel lives. I similarly was married to a narcissist, and I had Britt Frank on recently, and she's a psychotherapist who specializes in helping people heal from narcissistic relationships. And she has this course that I'm taking, and she talks about these like 6 different kinds of narcissists. And I'm like, oh my God, that's him. Anyway, I say that because she talks about what you were talking about when I forget what the name of it is, which type seems to attract people who are fixers and nurturers. I think it's the vulnerable narcissist or something like that. Anyway, I was very similar. And I don't know if this was the case with you. It sounded like it a little bit, but I got out of, my 2 back-to-back relationships and it was the same guy, better clothes the second time around, and was just a little bit taller. And I walked out of the second catastrophe thinking like, maybe it's me.
Yes. Oh my God, me too.
And it was yes, they had done shitty things and they had behaved poorly and needed to do so much of their own work. And so did I.
I completely agree.
And it took me a while to accept this. And it was either a therapist or a coach told me, sometimes the people who break our hearts the worst in retrospect turn out to be our biggest teachers. And when I first heard that, I was like, you can fuck all the way off with that. No, I want to choose my teachers and I would not have chosen this, but they were right. Like in retrospect, like once you do start to heal and can create distance between you and what happened and you and that person. Absolutely. Especially those 2 men in my life have been my biggest teachers.
Oh my God, I can wholeheartedly agree. And I remember the same thing happened when my second marriage ended. I just remember crying on the bathroom floor more times than I want to admit, saying, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck? I just don't understand. What did I do to get here? And same thing where I was like, there's no way that these people are my teachers. Like, these mofos are crazy sauce. Like, it's not me.
Yeah.
And, but it was that experience. And it was actually it's funny how the world happens, but I remember being down in the dumps and feeling like shit. And I happened to be scrolling through Facebook and I saw something that Susan Hyatt posted about the book, about a book that she read. And I think it was Martha Beck's book, Finding Your North Star. And that is how I started. That
was one of my first books too. It was good. We'll drop it in the show notes.
That's so funny.
It is a great book.
Yeah.
I have definitely been in that place where my paycheck ran out before the next one got here. Life doesn't happen bi-weekly, so why should payday? The money you earn can be in your hands today with Earnin. Earnin is an app that gives you access to your pay as you work, up to $100 per day or up to $750 per pay period. Just download the Earnin app and verify your paycheck. Then access up to $100 a day as you work and leave an optional tip. Any money you access plus tips are automatically repaid from your next paycheck. You can use Earnin to pay for a girls' night out, a last-minute gift for a loved one, or even summer camp for the kids. Make Earnin a part of your financial routine and join Earnin's over 3.5 million customers who say things like, when I think about Earnin, I think about financial stability, security. It gives me a lot of peace of mind. Download Earnin today, spelled EARNIN in the Google Play or Apple App Store. When you download the Earnin app, type in noise under podcast when you sign up. It really, really helps the show. Noise under podcast. Subject to your available earnings, location, daily max, and pay period max. See earnin.com/TOS for details. Earnin is a financial technology company, not a bank. Bank products are issued by Evolve Bank and Trust, member FDIC. It's hard to find a great mentor who can help me level up. My dream mentor, Shonda Rhimes. So I was really excited when I heard she has a class on Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the best to become your best. Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 plus of the world's best. For just $10 a month, an annual membership with Masterclass gets you unlimited access to every instructor. And you can access Masterclass on your phone, computer, smart TV, or even in audio mode. I'm always looking for ways to be a better writer, so I took Shonda Rhimes' screenwriting class. It helped me gain concrete technical advice, including structuring, the writing process, and with shows under her belt like Grey's Anatomy and Bridgerton, it was so helpful. Plus, every new membership comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Don't wait another moment to start your learning journey with Masterclass. Right now, our listeners get an additional 15% off any annual membership at masterclass.com/Andrea. That's 15% off at masterclass.com/Andrea. Masterclass.com/Andrea.
You mentioned something that I want to ask you more about in your, I can't remember if you said it was in your first relationship or your second one. It might have been both, where you ignored your gut. Like your intuition said, either it's time to get out or it's, you're not making the right decision and you ignored it. I'm curious why, now that you're out, why do you think that you ignored your intuition?
That's such a great question. So I think about this question often actually for myself, because I realize now that I ignored my intuition because I thought I knew better. I thought that there was no way that I had been making this mistake. And even though I had my whole life had followed my intuition, like throughout grade school, I had always had a really strong intuition and a really strong way of knowing what I want and getting it. And then I got involved with my first husband, and I swear it's like everything went out the window. I just was like, nope, I've got this. Like, I'll figure it out. And it was total ego. And I just didn't listen. And, when I think back in those moments, I knew that I was not making the best choices for myself, but I feel like the shame of making those bad choices was what kept me continuing to make them, if that makes any sense, because I didn't want to lose face in front of everybody. I came from a family who I am the one or one of the, I guess the sister that is doing, super well. And that, I didn't want everybody to know like, oh my God, you're making all these mistakes. And I didn't want to lose face in front of my family and friends. So I continued to go down this rabbit hole of making choices that were not the best for me. Yeah.
I can relate. I did the same thing. And I just was curious. I'm like, do people have different reasons for their intuition? And for me, it was that plus I knew that if I listened to my intuition, I was going to have to take action that sucked.
Yeah.
And both outcomes were terrible. Like on one hand, if I stay in this relationship that my gut is telling me is not good for me and it's just not going to end well, no matter how much I was hoping and trying to get this man to change and how much I was going to try to love him more, it was not going to end well. The other option is to listen to my gut and walk away. And same as you, the fear and shame and stigma of a failing marriage, I think now even in 2020 where we're so much more forgiving to people who get divorced, especially, for a long time, a woman who was divorced, it was incredibly taboo and there was so much judgment and criticism. That's different now, but it hasn't totally gone away. There still is, I think, this fear of being perceived a certain way when our relationships don't work out and the heartbreak of it. I think like, even if I always tell people, I'm like, divorce, and even if you're not married to the person, if you're in a long relationship and it breaks up, it sucks. Even if you're the person who wants to, if you're the one making the decision to walk away, it's incredibly painful, especially if you have children together and have to co-parent. Like the whole thing just sucks. And so I think that's a big reason why we stay. Like that hope that it's going to work out is strong. I don't know about you, but I felt like I would rather be in this not great / sometimes shitty relationship than no relationship at all.
Oh my God. Yeah. And as you were talking, it made me think of this moment where I realized I had fallen in love with both of my husbands. I had fallen in love with their potential. not with who they really were, but like that glimmer that, where everything worked
Just
out.
moments.
Yeah, those moments. And I feel like it was when I realized that is what opened the door for me to be able to find myself again. When I realized like, wow, like this is who you fell in love with. This is the real person. And that's okay, because we all have moments that we fall for the guy for where they are in that particular moment. We fall for that specific glimmer that makes us think like, oh, they're always going to be this way, and they're always going to grow with us, and they're always going to be supportive of us. And then we realize that there's much more to a person than just like this 2-second glimmer. And so, that's when, for me, it was that moment when I decided I could forgive myself. And that is when I felt comfortable to say, it was time to leave, and it was time to move forward and do something different. And even though, ending a relationship was difficult, especially my second husband, because him and I, it was different. We had essentially fallen out of love, and he fell out of love first. And so there wasn't like this big catastrophic event. There wasn't a cheating, and and not that makes it worse or better, but it was, for me, it was harder to move on from that, because I felt like it was me. And, and I felt like it was difficult to see what my next step was, because if this person had fallen out of love with me, how can I, then it's me, like what's wrong with me? And then that's when I realized, and in finding my way back to myself is when I realized like I had to do a lot of work on me and loving myself. And that is the premise of my work, and the work that I do with women now is surrounded around self-love. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big journey for me too. And I love that you talked about, you had to forgive yourself. And for me, that's been an ongoing process that I make some progress, and then I just don't think about it for a long time.
Yeah.
And then it somehow rears its ugly head in this sort of like indirect way. And I'm like, whoa, where'd you come from? You're back. More recently this year, and really diving into trauma therapy with my new therapist. And what I was crying in one session with her, and she was, asking me all the right questions. And one of the things that I said to her is, my inner critic, my negative self-talk around, especially my second relationship, because that one was, the level of betrayal and stories he made up and fabrications was so severe that I walked away just thinking to myself, like, what a stupid girl. And also when, did you ever see on Netflix or listen to the podcast, Dirty John?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So I found out about it because I was telling my friend Lisa my story about the guy I dated who lied about his opioid addiction by telling me he had cancer. And she was like, have you ever heard of this podcast? I'm like, no. And she's like, you have to go listen to it because it's a really similar story. So I went and listened to the podcast and was like, holy shit, this is like a thing that people do, addicts do. And then they later it was so successful, they turned it into a Netflix series. And it was really difficult for me to watch the series. The podcast was interesting, but when the series came out and they had him as a character, where in the podcast they didn't interview him, but it was like a dramatic reenactment on Netflix, and there he is, like in the flesh and doing all these things that my ex-boyfriend did, and it was extremely difficult for me to watch. Anyway, I tell you this story because online, when people are talking about that show or that podcast, there's so many comments online saying, how could she have been so stupid? And so my own inner critic is telling me that even before I see all those things. And then I see people saying that, and they're not saying that directly about me, but she and I have a very similar story. And so I'm like, essentially people are saying that about me. So see, it's true. So here I am, 2 self-help books in, and I teach about inner critic work, and it's so much more than just negative self-talk many times, because it is shame work and it is shame resilience that we have to learn. It's a very long way of me talking about shame resilience. And really that it's not something that is one and done. And I mean, I don't know about you, but you're years out of your second divorce ending, correct?
Yes, I'm of almost 5 now, almost 5 years.
Do you feel like you're still working on the healing?
Oh my God, every day. And just what you were saying about shame resilience, this is huge for me as well. I realized when I had gotten out of my second divorce, I did also do some therapy as well, and realized like, wow, I had so much shame built up from many years, different types of shame, but they all kind of came into relationships essentially, and they all transferred into my relationships. And so it is still something that I work through every single day, and something, that I teach, along with, because finding our way back to joy is essentially getting through those layers. We've got to get through those layers of self-healing and loving ourselves again.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And where can people find you? Like, what social media channel do you hang out the most, and how can they learn more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. On Facebook, I am under Live by Design, and also under my name, Liza Harper. And then on Instagram, I'm under Liza L. Harper. So you can find me there, and I would, connect with anyone who is interested in knowing more about me and just wanting to hang out and say hello. So I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I will drop those links into the show notes for everybody, along with Liza's website. And thank you so much for listening, everyone. You know how I love that you spend time with me and my guests. Thank you so much for that time. And until next time, everybody, I will see you all out in cyberspace. Bye-bye.
I'd like to introduce you to the Minimalist Moms podcast. It's hard enough being a mom, and the last thing you need is stress from too much stuff and an overcrowded schedule. For too long, I lived with the mindset that bigger was better, and the more I added to my life, instead of feeling better, I felt overwhelmed. It was time for a radical new mindset. Less is more. I'm not into extremes. I didn't throw everything away. My brand of minimalism is more about adding than subtracting. Get rid of the excess to make room for what you love. In other words, it's about living life with purpose. I hope you'll listen in, and my guest and myself can inspire you to think more and do with less. The Minimalist Moms podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.